welcome to another episode of the Sharper Edge podcast with Betty Parker. I am happy that you have stopped by yet again. I say that every time, right? But hey, we're at episode 17. This is awesome that you all have decided to just kind of make this podcast a little bit a part of your day. And I hope you'll jump into the discussions because this one's a biggie. This one is one that I think will draw a lot of interest simply because and in some ways, people have made it controversial, and it doesn't have to be. So, my special guest with me today, Ms. Deborah Washington, who is a recently retired, let me get it right now, recently retired DEI manager of an academic medical institution, is with me today to talk a little bit about. We want to do some myth busting. We want to change the rhetoric that's out there about DEI. I believe, just based on my own observations and discussions I've had with people throughout the community and in the just basically in various aspects of workplaces and in the world, there is just a lot of misunderstanding. And I think, and we all know this, where there's a lack of understanding, there's fear. And so we want to try to alleviate some of what's been put out there that's not actually accurate, put a lot more meaningful context around it. So it's not just something that people argue about, but they have a true understanding of what it is. And so I'm happy to have Ms. Deb on this call with me today to talk through this. Because Deb, how long? Welcome, first of all. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
So first of all, how long have you been in this work?
Well, I started this work in 1986. And thank you for that introduction because it settles me down into the conversation. I have been in the DEI world for so long with like-minded people and people who were eager to learn that it's news to me that people are in the state of misunderstanding it and finding it threatening.
Mhm.
So I'm really looking forward to this conversation within that context.
I appreciate that because, yeah, I know you're way eons above what, basic everyday folks. Most people have likely not even been through any type of DEI training. They're getting their information from their friends and family members or some stuff that they've seen in clips and pieces out in the community. They're hearing from folks in different, levels of government that are saying, we're hearing all of the, the negative press around it. So it's really taken on a very negative feel. And I believe that if people came to fully understand it, we wouldn't get as much pushback. People would probably be much more alarmed at the fact that this is something that there's an active campaign to dismantle. And so, yeah, we have to help people understand it's not the threat that folks are telling you it is. So, let's help them to understand a lot better, Deb, with all the many years of experience you've been doing this, just kind of enlighten it. So I hate to take you to the basics, the 101 of what diversity, equity, and inclusion are, right down to I hear people call the E part equity. I mean, equality. They think it's diversity, equality, and inclusion. And so there's a difference between equity and equality that I don't think people have a full understanding of either. So just, and they see the term DEI. And the one thing I've heard people do often is conflate DEI and affirmative action. They think they're exactly the same thing, not realizing there are three different components to DEI. It's not all one thing, right? They all kind of feed into each other in terms of fairness and equity and that kind of thing, but they're all distinctly different. So we're here to educate people. We're not here to create controversy, but just to add more, breadth to the knowledge that people might not necessarily have on these topics. So you've been at this since 1986. In what capacity?
I was a manager for the medical and nursing workforce in the academic medical center where I worked, meaning that I did team building training, I did conflict resolution, I developed curriculum, I did event planning, any and everything that would determine whether or not people were able to get together, meet one another, and talk. And in the academic medical center where I worked, we had tens of thousands of people who were employed there, and they were slotted into their role groups. So they didn't naturally interact. You had to build the bridges and the opportunities for them to get together and learn and talk to one another and build relationships.
Hmm.
I'm going to suggest, if I may,
Go ahead.
that we do one thing primarily, and that is not to engage in language that will require the language police to sort of take us down that path.
Right.
What I'd like for us to do is to talk about the concepts.
Okay.
The concepts around in 1986, before we did diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it just came under the umbrella of diversity. The concept was, let's look around in this dominant culture of whiteness and take a look at who's sitting at the table other than white people.
Hmm.
And the reason that conversation came forward in terms of the answering of that question was all about a report that was developed and funded through the Hudson Institute, and it was called Workforce 2000.
Okay.
So we were taking a look at Workforce 2000 way back in 1986.
Hmm.
And people had a chance to look around to see who was there to make decisions, who was there to share information that would inform decision making. And it was pretty obvious that it was one singular group. And that had to change because this Hudson report said in the future that is coming for all of us, the workforce is going to become less white male, more female, more people of color.
Oh, okay. That was probably an eye-opening experience for a lot of people, or a bit of information for a lot of people, right?
Exactly.
And so the response to that was,
We need to do some recruiting. We need to bring those people who have been marginalized,
mhm,
ostracized, bring them from the edges into the center of the room, sitting at the table, so that we can do some problem solving where the future is coming. We can't avoid the future.
mhm,
The demographics are telling us exactly what that future is going to look like. So I need to have people that I can employ. I need to have people who can work well together. I need to have people who can read and write and have the ability to progress in their careers. I need people who can help me to keep my business going 25, 30, 40 years from now.
mm. So when you think about, like you said, we're talking big concepts. So when you think about, this was like a call, a herald that times are changing. Way back in mid 80s, right? So times are changing, and it's time for organizations to get on board with that change because it's inevitable. So where will you be, in terms of getting ahead of this and being prepared for that change and willing to I would imagine just getting people who might not ordinarily have those interactions that you talked about. You said there were
Exactly.
some people, yeah, the table had to get a little bit different in terms of the makeup and who would be in there to help, grow the organization, I would imagine, right?
You said, well, it was an inevitable future. And so if you can put it under the umbrella of the employer's self-interest, I cannot avoid what's coming,
Mm-hmm.
so I have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to continue to exist in terms of my business, in terms of my own standard of living, in terms of keeping the economy above water, then I need to face the reality of the people who are going to be working for me are not sitting at this table
Mm-hmm.
in 1986.
Hmm. Now, what was that like, Deb? You had the opportunity to sit at that table, I would imagine, and see the change evolve over time. How was it then versus when you recently retired? How much different has it become? Or has it?
A tremendous difference.
Okay.
In many different ways. I don't want to be overly critical, but I also want to be truthful. As I remember back to when I was working in my institution, I remember the very first time when I went to a meeting of the healthcare providers of color who were invited to that meeting by the Vice President of Human Resources. It wasn't until I was in the room with more than two or three people of color that I realized how that was not part of my daily work environment to be able to see another person of color.
Mm.
I was shocked
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of you don't realize what is happening around you if what is happening around you is the so-called norm. It's not until somebody takes you into another environment and you can do some comparing that
Yeah.
you realize, well, wait a minute, how did this happen?
Right. And and so I think that's a lesson right there for the majority group, any majority group. When you finally open the door and are much more thoughtful about who is in the room with you, and you start saying, okay, here's a new set of folks, I'll call it that, who are
Mhm.
coming in with their own perspectives, their own experiences. And either the choices are I can invite them in all the way in and hear about that and hear from them and value what they have to bring, or I can say, I don't like this because, like you said, what was the norm has now been disrupted. And I like the way the norm was, even though it was a homogenous group of people. We were all the same, but we were comfortable where we were. Keep those people outside that door because we don't need them bringing in their different perspectives, right? And we know
Exactly.
that companies lose when that thing happens. But to your point, too, as a person of color coming into an environment, it had become normal for you to see this one homogenous group of people, just doing what they do because that's how the world had always been. And now all of a sudden you're seeing people who look a lot like you. It's like, wait a minute. Oh, wow. Didn't know this was possible, right? Eye opener, even for you. What does that say to us today, though, in terms of, keeping that going? Because people are pushing
What
back.
is constructed for us as normal? Part of the difficulty of the dominant group being satisfied with everybody who looks like them at the table is that that is their norm, and people are comfortable with norms.
Hmm.
Then they're faced with an inevitable problem. So the inevitable problem has to be faced for the sake of survival. So here is where oppression and control
Yeah.
comes into play.
Hmm.
You face the reality of the problem, but you control the inflow of who is going to bring difference to the table.
Oh.
It's the trickle effect. You don't let in 20 at one time, you let in one or two.
Hmm.
And then those one or two are at the table and now have to contribute. But what they contribute is also controlled.
Mm.
There are the do's and don'ts of how are you going to be successful in this new environment. And we who control the table will determine what is allowed and what is not allowed. That's
Mm.
where organizational culture comes in.
Hmm.
What does it take to be successful in this environment? Number one. Number two is what will it take for you as the different person to be successful in this environment?
And so the dominant group wants to hold on to what they've always had. They're allowing, like you said, that trickle effect in sometimes to the extent that, oh, we just want to make sure that people realize we're trying to get on board with this new change. So we're letting in our one or two to say, hey, look at us, we're diverse. But you're going to still control even, the conversations and the actions of the people that you allowed in because you're still trying to hold on to that structure that's always been in place. And that's not going to work, right? We already know that. If you invite me into your space and I got well, let me say this, it'll work for people who are willing to be controlled. But for those who say, if you've invited me into this space, I'm going to have my opinion. I'm going to voice my opinion. It might be different from yours, but I believe my perspective has value, so I'm going to say it, right? And those people who don't like that, will try to tamp that down and keep you in a particular place where you play the game that has become the norm.
Well, that's when wisdom is
Mm,
required.
okay.
It's that whole wisdom of, okay, I'm one of two sitting among 20.
Mm-hmm.
I have an opinion to offer. How am I going to voice this opinion so that it can be paid attention to as opposed to being dismissed or unheard, not captured? The dilemma of the first or the dilemma of the one or two at the dominant table is how do I win in this situation? I first have to be heard. I first have to have impact. And in order to do that, I have to understand what the rules are about what I can say, how I can say it, who do I say it to.
Mm-hmm.
And that means you have to have friends at the table. So my wisdom is all about how do I develop relationships and how do I use wisdom so that I don't push the pace of learning that's required for
Mm-hmm.
this table
Mm-hmm.
too fast
Right. Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to always put them on guard around having to control me.
Ah.
So you're jumping from one foot to the other as the first one or two all the time.
Yes, yeah. So I can see where that oppression comes in then. Because
Mhm.
you can't be fully you, you can't fully express yourself, you can't be as open as you want to. You got to do everything based on how do I push this group, inch them along to a new day without upsetting the apple cart, and for you in your mind, you're like, it's easy, just do this thing, right? But no, no, no. If you push them too hard or too fast, then you're the enemy. You can actually deconstruct what you're trying to build. And I get it. But that's a quite a balancing act, huh? It's exhausting, isn't it?
It's exhausting. I always tell people that Black people make the best diplomats, the best employees of any State Department, because we have to use the same skills that people who work in foreign countries have to use. You have to understand where the other side is coming from and do that dance of, I have to do what is necessary to remain in relationship with this person so that I can get the group's agenda and my personal agenda taken care of.
And trying to make those run parallel can be so difficult because, the group is not considering the things that might be specific to the group of people you are trying to represent too. Because a lot of times when we look at this whole DEI work, a lot of times there are people who are coming as champions within the organization and say, hey, listen, don't forget about this whole segment of your employee workforce who are experiencing these things in the workforce, right? And
Exactly.
the dominant group might not even be thinking about that, also not recognizing that's why we need that diversity within our leadership team or whatever team you have set up, because people are experiencing the workplace differently. And so for those people who push back, that's what I'm trying to get a better understanding, hoping people will get a better understanding. Just because you are in your workplace and maybe you're part of that dominant group and you're not having issues doesn't negate the fact that other people might be. They might feel that oppression. They might feel overlooked. They might feel devalued. They might feel like they know they have all the qualifications and skills and credentials to, make it to the next level within this organization, but somehow that's been tamped down, it's been pressed down because of the people who can make decisions about this person's future. And that's what I
Exactly.
don't think people think about enough. They think, well, oh, you're just whining and complaining. Y'all already have all of the best benefits. Y'all like to play the victim. It's far from that. It's much deeper than what people understand.
That's why we as Black people place great value on telling our story because we have rich experience contained in our story.
Hmm.
However, when you're talking to the dominant culture wants data.
Ah.
If you're going to get attention from the dominant culture, you need to describe the issue based on the report of data. How many of these people are not being hired when you have open positions compared to those who are getting in?
Mm-hmm.
How many people who are selected to be chairs of committees are not people who don't look like you or who
Mm-hmm.
didn't go to the school that you went to?
Mm-hmm.
How many people are being left out of being able to work here because your criteria for employment for this role group is based upon another group's inability to achieve the educational level? For example, nursing at one point in the 80s was in the 90 percentile of being white,
Wow.
BSN. There's a problem there.
Yeah, I would say.
But the issue was a professional nurse was being described as somebody who was educated to have a bachelor's degree.
Mm-hmm.
And the profession was moving towards being regarded as a profession so that it could make better headway against the medical community in terms of being independent decision makers and able to run their own show. So those of us who are Black were getting educated with an associate's degree,
Mm-hmm.
educated in the hospital environment to learn how to be a nurse, while the white nurse was going to college to get a bachelor's degree.
Mm-hmm.
So we were always one step behind. The profession was taking care of itself,
Yeah,
developing criteria for what determined professionalism, and we didn't have access so that we could meet that criteria.
gotcha.
So the system, and that's where the whole idea of structural racism comes in. The
Mm-hmm.
system is designed to move forward thoughtlessly
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to those who cannot meet the demands of what is being constructed.
You know, when you talked about data, that's why one of the things I do when I've had companies come to me and say, hey, we want to create some type of diversity strategy, some strategic plan around becoming a much more thoughtful company in terms of how diverse our organization is and if we're keeping a place of fairness and equity, right? And so the first thing we do, I recommend, is a survey. And so I always administer surveys first so they can hear from their own people about how they feel they're being treated within the workplace. And then we look at the demographics. And generally, I mean, the demographics don't lie, the numbers don't lie. So if you are a company that's 77% white, 80% white, well, I mean, there it is. I mean, and they know that. That's why
Why?
they ask me. I know they'll say, we realize we're largely a white company, right? So they'll say that. So they want to know what are the minority groups in their organization experiencing. And so we have to ask some of the tough questions. And they're pretty shocked by some of the things that they hear. You know, there's a lot of just behavior regarding microaggressions and stereotypes that people experience. And I'm going to say and try to be as frank as possible with this. It's not always intentional. That's microaggressions, right? It's a lot of unconscious bias that exists in organizations because people are like, I didn't realize that was a thing. Wouldn't have done it had I known, or I wouldn't have said this thing had I known, that kind of thing, right? Because they don't get a lot of training. They don't get an opportunity to sit and have the conversations you and I are talking about right now. So many times in my training, Black people talk about race all the time because we're constantly faced with it in some way, shape, or form, right? We like to walk away from all that conversation too, but every day somebody reminds us that we are Black and they don't particularly care that we're here or they're going to doubt or diminish something of value in us. And then I hear from a lot of the white people in my classes, hey, we don't even talk about this at home. I didn't grow up in a household where we talked about race that much. Right. So it never even occurs to them the things that we have to encounter on a regular basis and why it's so important to us. So these things come out in the survey. And so I share that survey with the organizations. A lot of times they're shocked they didn't know these things were going on in there. And then they say, okay, let's start doing things differently. How do we hire people? What's our criteria around some of that? And some of them will make a concerted effort to make sure they're doing it differently. Now, there are people that will get angry with that because they'll say, hey, you're hiring based on race versus or gender or, or any of the other, classes. You're hiring based on that and not for the best quality person. So they tend to separate people of color or any of the protected classes from the wider group. They feel like if I choose to hire somebody who is a woman or somebody who's black or Hispanic or Asian or something, if I choose to hire them, I'm neglecting the fact that these people have to be qualified. I'm taking something away from a white candidate simply because I'm looking for somebody who is from one of these other classes, not recognizing that this company is already 77% or 80% white. The people that are missing are very qualified. They need to be given a shot. We're trying to open a door for them to also be seen and valued because they have a lot to bring to your company. But folks push back on that. They don't like it. They think you're somehow being there's a whole reverse racism thing going on, Yeah. And I know you've seen a lot of that coming from, the big organization you were in and the many thousands of people you've had to do this work with for years and years and years. How do you explain that to people in plain language so they can understand this isn't something we're taking away from one group and giving to another. We're just trying to level the playing field.
Well, part of the answer in my experience has been true leadership, top of the house leadership. The
Hmm.
best leaders in the place where I worked came in with the attitude of basically, this is going to change because I say so.
Ah,
End of story.
took control. Hmm.
So once that statement is made, the smartest thing I've ever seen a leader do is, okay, we're going to get this done. We cannot be predominantly white and be able to serve a multicultural population because there's just too many misunderstandings and, the whole 9 yards that you're very familiar with. So,
Hmm.
how do we correct this? To avoid resistance, the C-suite leader said, okay, we need to correct this overall problem. I want you to come to me and tell me the story of your department, identify the problems that you would face in terms of recruitment, and if you have a high turnover rate of people of color or women or people who are LGBTQ related, I want you to explain to me why that problem exists. And then after you tell me that data-driven story, turnover rates for particular groups, the whole 9 yards, I want you to tell me the resources you need to address that problem.
Mm.
The brilliant thing for me in that scenario was you tell on yourself, you set your own goals in a very
Hmm.
public way. There's nothing private about this. We're doing this as an organization, and I'm going to help you to solve the problem that you've identified. So the responsibility becomes one that is placed upon the leader
Hmm.
who is in charge of that department, that unit, whatever the area is. And that way you decrease resistance. In the process of being able to present the data, there is an aha moment for that well-intentioned
Hmm.
leader. To your point, there's always going to be somebody, right?
Hmm.
But at least even the one who is resistant still has to present.
Yeah.
And so that is one way to decrease resistance and get everybody moving forward in some way, shape, or form.
I've had a
That's
lot
the
of
best use I've ever seen of data.
Yeah, I've had managers that have said, Betty, you know what? I look at my team and I realize they're all like me. I
Mhm.
hire people who are like me. They don't, yeah. And so they miss out. If everybody on your team is just like you, what are you missing out on? So the data will tell the story. Yeah. So if I have to examine my team and see I'm missing all kinds of people, and the other part that I don't want to be lost in this conversation is the people you serve, because most organizations are serving somebody else, right? So, what does your customer base look like?
That's
And do
right.
you have people that can relate to them, right?
That's right.
Yeah, because I know I am not the end all be all to knowing everybody's culture and what's
That's right.
important to them. I would want to hire people that have better insight than I do to say, what are we missing in our service to this group? Because I don't know it, I don't live it every day, but you're close to it. So I need you on my team so we can make sure we're serving this group well, and that group well, and that group well. And it has nothing to do with ostracizing or ignoring one particular group or giving favoritism to one over another. It's just good business at the end of the day.
Is it good business? Do you want to increase your market share? Do you want to increase your customer base? If you just want to be practical and
Mm-hmm.
not even get into the human experience of justice and fair play and all of those wonderful ideas, if
Mm-hmm.
you just want to follow the money,
Just follow the money, which is what
just
most people do.
follow the money, then here is the business case for following the money that will
Yes.
benefit you.
Yes.
Now, once you get that story told, now you have to address, well, now that these different people are here,
Uh-huh.
different meaning you don't look like me, you don't live in my neighborhood, you don't socialize with me, but you are part of my work environment.
Mm-hmm.
And you might develop an attitude and you might make it hard for me to be here. Now the issue becomes, how do you create inclusion?
Yeah.
Diversity, equity, inclusion, uh, diversity, equality, and inclusion, all of that stuff really is about, once we are all here to address the business case,
Mm-hmm.
I deserve fair treatment.
That's right.
Now, what are
That's
you going
all
to
it
do
is.
to give that to me?
Yeah. And so this is what amazes me that people are saying, oh, we got to get rid of all of that, right? With these DEI hires. That's a negative term that's out there now, or this woke ideology or whatever the deal is. It has nothing to do with that. What you just said, I think the majority of people can get behind, even if you think you don't support DEI. How many people, if I had a whole, group of folks up in here right now, and I asked them to raise their hands and say how many people want to work in an environment where they feel like they're being fairly treated, I'm pretty sure the 99.9% of people going to raise their hands, right? And that's all it is. If you want to boil it down to its true essence, it's about making sure everybody has a great and positive experience at work because they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel valued. They're not pressed aside along the walls and said and told you can be here, but you can't say anything. I'm going to dictate to you how you're going to behave over here. I'm going to ignore the fact that you have all these credentials and you are qualified, and not just because I hired you because I'm trying to fill a quota, but because you actually have the education, you got all the references, you got all the experience from previous employees where you deserve to be here. But yet people will diminish them because they'll say, oh, she's a black woman. She can't possibly be qualified. She doesn't have the brain processing power.
And that's just another tactic for saying, we don't want you here, you don't belong here. So defend yourself,
Right. And
right?
there we go again. There's that exhaustion again, right? Because we got it all day, every day. There's that extra layer where we can't just come to work and do the things we're really good at. We have to constantly be on the defense. And then people stereotype a whole group of people because they feel like they are defensive. Well, if you had to live this life every day where you're constantly having to defend yourself and say, I'm worth it, I can be in these spaces, yeah, you do come about with a little bit of a chip on your shoulder because you don't know who's the next person that's going to challenge you for like the 100th time this month when you've been just trying to do your job. You just want to go over here, do your thing, show your work, and just be appreciated for it. But we can't, that's not always as easily accepted or given as for some people. Some people do get it a whole lot better and easier.
Well, part of that issue
Mm.
is how we began the conversation in terms of, we have no social interaction
Right.
when we are part of the dominant culture.
Hmm.
We don't, who do we invite to our homes? Who do we go shopping with?
Right.
Who do we go to the movies with?
Hmm.
Who do we spend the weekend with? Who comes to dinner? The whole nine yards. And if we don't have the social interaction, then we don't get to see that side of the story, the other
Hmm.
point of view. We don't just talk. This whole notion of having to explain myself and explain why I feel what I feel, or explain why what was just said was racist, or why what was just said was a microaggression. The inability to receive that, accept that, recognize that is based upon the fact that I only talk to people who look like me, sound like
Right.
me, grew up where I grew up. I don't have a different experience. On the other hand, those who are not part of the dominant culture know the dominant culture very well, because we're always having to be in their presence and
Yes.
dealing with their issues. The
Hmm.
reverse is not true.
That's right. Oh, so true. Oh, so very true. Yes. So, and that's what I try to emphasize when I do these trainings, right? That a lot of people push back on. A lot of folks don't want to have it. Oh, we got to do another DEI training. Why? And they come in there like this and they're already closed off because they think they're going to be under attack. All right. And so I try to just kind of calm all of that down from the very beginning. And regardless, they're going to have some tough conversations. I mean, that's just part of it. And they're going to be uncomfortable and they're going to be triggers. And I try to let them know that ahead of time. All in all, I get really good reviews in the end where people are like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, right? So if you come in with a closed mind and you come in with expecting the worst, then more than likely you're going to get what you're looking for. I've been able to change some minds, but not everybody, right? There's some people who they're not even listening at this point. So in those classes, my intent is to do just what you said, to open up the floor for conversations. So I'll put things out there, scenarios or questions or whatever, and let the class talk it through because they don't often get that opportunity. They don't put themselves in places where they can be with a diverse group of folks and ask the hard questions or have the tough conversations. Some of them will jump right into it and, be ready for it. There are the others that just kind of sit in the back and listen. They're trying to absorb it, but they're trying to listen. And there are others that are just angry and they don't care. They don't care. They don't even want to have any parts of the conversation. And they will always be relegated to their very limited thinking and understanding because they're not open enough to receive other people who might be different from them. And so, and they always make the loudest noise, it seems sometimes.
And isn't that the ultimate example of privilege?
Yes,
I don't want to learn because I don't have to.
I don't have to. Mm-mm. And I don't have to associate with y'all if I don't want to anyway.
If I don't want to, I
Yep.
can leave you when I leave work. I'm leaving you behind.
Yes.
Because I'm not going to see you anyplace else until I come back to work again in a personal, interactive kind of a way.
Yep.
The ultimate irritation, and I'll be honest, the ultimate irritation I've always had is this whole notion of, okay, those of you who belong to the dominant group, you can not only say, I want to learn X and not Y, and I will only learn it at this rate and this pace and not that one. That is the ultimate element of control.
Yes, ma'am.
I am the person who needs to learn, but I'm going to tell you what the
I'm
content
going
is
to tell
going
you
to
how
be,
I'm going. Yeah.
and I'm going to tell you how fast I want to learn it.
Hmm.
It's like,
I've seen so many and heard so many things, even within the classroom. It's as I'm trying to explain to them what's acceptable in society. Of course, then you get uh, I don't know, chastised in a sense for being too politically correct. All right. So now is that thing? Yeah. If I'm saying that according to, this particular group of people, you saying or doing this thing is considered a microaggression because they find it offensive. It might be subtle to you or not a big deal to you, but to them it has meaning. So, and I try to explain those things, right? But they will, while we're in the class, um, express some type of microaggression. I'm like, you're actually doing it right now while we're talking, right? So it's like, this is why we need to have these conversations because they'll be shocked. I didn't know that was a bad thing. I'm like, yeah, it is. You can't say that anymore. And then, of course, like I say, then you get to a point where they say, oh, you're being too politically correct. No, it's at the end of it all, at the basis of all of that part, it's about respect. I don't think it's about being too politically correct. It's about respecting what's meaningful to other people. Even though you don't understand it, there's so many cultures I don't understand stuff that they might. I'm like, oh wow, I gotta be careful not to say or do the same because I do respect what they believe in, right? I don't have to agree with it. It doesn't have to make sense to me, right? It's not up to me to make those judgments about somebody else's culture. I just accept and appreciate what they say and try to abide by their rules. Everybody has boundaries, and so if this is their line that says you're crossing it, Betty, and this is offensive, then I got to back up and say, oops, I'm not going to do that anymore. But folks don't want to do that. They want to wag a finger at you and tell you you're overreacting and playing a victim, when in actuality, they're the ones that are being the problem. They're just basically the problem. Yeah. So this is why we need the education, Deb. I mean, people, you
It,
know,
I totally agree with everything that you just said. And part of the skill set that you demonstrate and articulate so well is the skill set of being able to create an open learning environment where everybody should feel comfortable to share what they have on their minds.
hmm
And the language police, in many ways, have disempowered words and have put in language that's so artificial, it has no meaning at all.
yeah.
And I'm of a particular generation where I tell people, okay, I'm about to use a very old-fashioned word that
hmm
means something to me. And many of our old-fashioned words have not lost their power.
hmm
I will say things like, I'm going to honor that response by doing this. I believe in fidelity to your values, my values, the principles of justice, all of those kinds of things, because humility and respect and
Yeah.
fidelity and devotion and grace and all those
Right. Beautiful words. Yes.
beautiful words, we need to
Yes.
bring those back
We do. We really do. And demonstrate them. Act accordingly,
and
right?
demonstrate
I don't
them.
think people know how anymore, though. I don't think they know what it is to be humble. I don't think they know what it is to extend grace and forgiveness and honor and all those things. That's gone out the window because we see demonstrated on a regular basis all over media, all over TV, all of this stuff where people from the highest levels in this land think it's okay to denigrate a person, to demean a person, to judge a person, to talk down on somebody, and to just incite a lot of anger and resentment towards other people. The one thing I hear people say all the time is we're more divided as a nation here in these United States than ever before. And I don't know, I think we've been divided a whole lot before, prior to this, but there was a place, I think, where you're talking about in the 90s as we were coming out of the 60s and all of the hatred and stuff that came from there. And then so we had this wonderful Civil Rights Act that came about and kind of I believe corralled some of the behavior that was really I guess what's the word I'm looking for? It really demonstrated that for the minority groups in this country, they finally have some protections. I'll just call it that, when the Civil Rights Act came. So the whole let me treat you any kind of way I want to kind of got put in its place. And so there's some laws and some protections, right? So then I think we kind of lulled into, okay, everybody's kind of on their better behavior, not best, but better behavior. Things started getting better. There was improvements in the way we interacted. People of all different walks of life were able to come together to a certain extent. It wasn't a kumbaya kind of thing, but more respect was given. More people kind of let people have their space in society, that kind of thing. And now it seems like the clock is being turned backwards, where that division that once existed is now rearing its ugly head again. I don't know if the hatred and animosity and racism that existed, back when I was just a kid, if it has always been there and been sleeping, and now somebody's giving it permission to wake up, to rear its ugly head, and to be, what it was before, because we're seeing that on every front. At least that's how I'm seeing it. a lot, where there's a lot of ugly language and rhetoric that's out there right now, and people are turning on each other. That friendliness and neighborly stuff, that sense of community, it's kind of gone by the wayside. And that's what bothers me.
Well, what a part of the answer that I have to that concern is this. We as Black people, and I just love our culture. We as Black people need to reclaim our identity.
Ah,
We as Black people are people who have always dealt with oppression by valuing pride in
uh-huh.
ourselves. You know,
Hmm.
push on me, beat on me, but you're not going to destroy my value to myself. You're not going to destroy how I value my community, my brother, my sister, my family, my blood. I mean, we used language that said we are in this together.
Hmm.
It used to always bother me when people would say, "Oh, Black people are not a monolith." No, but we have a monolithic experience.
Right?
If
Hmm.
you're Black, you have the experience of all Black people. So in that way, we are a strong monolith. So let's take
Hmm.
the lessons that we learned from that. We've always operated as a village, spiritually and mentally. We've
Yes.
never separated ourselves in that sense. Well, once upon a time, I'm beginning to be really concerned that we've lost touch with that part of us.
Hmm.
We have always claimed God. We've always claimed Christ. We've always claimed our spirituality.
Hmm.
If we're accepting an Oscar, we're going to thank God.
Right?
If we're, at a church meeting, we're going to thank God. I don't want to see us stray from that.
Hmm.
I remember having a conversation with someone once, and we were talking about what it meant to be black and the love that we have for one another, even the stranger who's a brother or a sister.
Right?
And this person said to me, Deb, there is one thing that I really love about us as a people. We never throw anybody away.
Right.
And when you think about us as families, nuclear families, if
Yes.
you will, I don't care if you were the worst alcoholic in the family or the one who went to jail, whatever, the door was always open to you in one way,
Yes,
shape, or form,
ma'am. Hmm.
So that kind of rescue of one another, I'd like to see us reclaim and shout from the
Yeah.
rooftops the way we used to. We don't do that as much as I'd like to see us do
Mm-mm.
anymore.
A lot of people say the farther we move away from, the way the world used to be when we had to do those things because we were forced into supporting one another because we were so ostracized, right? Because we're a minority group. And we were told that we were less than in so many ways. So now these newer generations coming, they haven't had to experience that. There are a lot of little privileged black kids running around here too.
I
Okay.
know.
So
I
they
know.
haven't had the hardships that we had to have in growing up and experiencing things we did, so they don't feel like it's as important, and so they're moving away from that sense of community. And it's becoming very inner focused and very self-centered. A lot of people now, these generations to come, but they're about to get a good little taste of it. I believe if we stay on the pathway we are right now, where
We
things that
need to
work.
we need to
Mhm.
start telling those generational stories again because
Yes.
that is what kept us going, right? We knew
Hmm.
with mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and big mama and all those
Hmm.
loving endearments that we had for people who populated our lives. We knew their stories.
Yeah.
We were at family reunions, Sunday dinner, after Sunday school, during church. We were all in the collective.
Yes.
Nothing was kept or nothing was unspoken. It was all out there for us to learn from and to be included in. And we need to get back to that tradition, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to your point, we were also a lot of times still around when they were going through that too. How many black, well, people our age, black men and women who saw mom or grandmama go to work in somebody's kitchen, right? A white woman's kitchen, taking in her wash, taking care of her children, hearing their fathers being called certain names and being talked down to and treated like boys when they were men, things of that sort. So we saw the denigration of the folks in our families. It's only we're not that far removed from that kind of behavior. But these kids now get to see parents who have in some ways made it a little bit better. They're making more money. They got these jobs and whatever, whatever. And everything is about money, 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 money. And we're forgetting about, the actual experiences of, how people are really have faced this throughout the generations. And we are the ones that's most afraid that it's making a comeback. And we're the ones that are most, stressed out. Are y'all seeing what's happening? Are you seeing what we can't go back? Cannot go back. Yeah.
We have to help them to open their eyes. I
Yeah.
mean, I grew up in the Jim Crow South, you know.
Right.
We're only talking like 40 years ago or so.
Right.
I mean, this
Absolutely.
was yesterday.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So this the those who are in their 20s or 30s or whoever feel like it's not a problem anymore.
Right.
It's because they don't see it. You
That's
don't
what
know
I'm
what you
talking about.
don't know. And they
Hmm.
don't see it because I believe we've stopped telling them stories that would enable them to see it for
Hmm.
what it is.
Hmm. And there are a lot of white people that I've heard from. I mean, they say it in the classes and stuff. Yeah, we know that existed, and they'll say things like, but we don't own slaves. We know slavery existed. We know it was a horrible, terrible time, but my parents don't own slaves. Why do I have to still, deal with the vestiges of that kind of life? But I'm trying to say, I ain't even talking about slavery. When I'm telling you about the things we're going through, this is the most recent, times. It
We're
ain't even
talking
that
about the
far back.
structures. We're
Yeah, the
talking about the
structures, the
structures that
systems.
you
Yes.
people who look like you built and are keeping in place, not
Yes.
your interpersonal behaviors. We're talking about the structure. And
Yes.
if I'm going to teach you about the structure and identify for you through data what the problems in the structure are, it is your responsibility presently today to deconstruct those issues for those who are being left out and treated unfairly. That is your responsibility.
Absolutely. See, that's the part I want people to get to. So
Mm.
it's not just about, we're not out here just spouting, grievances, right? We're looking to you to say, okay, if you are in a position where you can help us, it's not to take anything away from you, it's to say, let's right this ship, right? It's going in the wrong direction. There are other people out here besides you and your dominant group that can add have so much more to add to society, right? If we're just given the opportunity. That's that inclusion piece. I don't think people realize that DEI, the I is inclusion. Why can't we be included? And if you have the power and the position to include me in this, what's wrong with that? Why won't you take that initiative and do that? I'm just looking to you to help open this door wide. What was it, James Brown that said, I don't need anybody to give me a handout of just open the door and I'll go get it myself, right? So yeah, we ain't looking for nobody for the whole handout thing. Hey, we are capable. It's just that if you'll just create the pathway for me to get there, because there's so many things blocking me. And if people don't understand, so you said about Black people liking, and needing to tell their stories, the value is in our stories. So when I was trying to get out of the pharmaceutical world and enter into the business world myself back in 2006, and I was looking around for different franchise organizations that I could get into because I'm looking for a turnkey operation, right? So it's just something I can walk into, invest my money in it, walk into it, sell whoever's product it is, and then make money that way and start on this road to business ownership, entrepreneurship for myself. So I had a guy who was helpful in sending me different organizations that he thought would be a good fit for me. So he was like a franchise broker. So he would say, hey, try this company, try that company, whatever. And I would go through whatever the processes were for them to vet me. Well, there was one company in particular because he sent me through this little battery of tests to determine where my interests were. And since I was already in sales, so he wanted to find companies that where I could sell. I told him I'd done a little bit of training in the pharmaceutical industry, so I wanted to stick with training. And so he was looking for something where I can sell and train. And so he sent me this one company. I only spoke with a lady at the beginning of it, and she asked me just a few questions by phone. It was not a long conversation, and sent me a DISC assessment. I use DISC assessments right now myself, and it helps to determine what your style is, right? So this was a company that did coaching and specifically executive coaching. So according to my DISC assessment, I would have been a shoe-in for this, right? Because it's all about relationship building, which is one of my fortes. I never met a stranger, right? Yak, 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 yak. I just talk. No. I love people. I'm all, yeah, all day long. So they send me this, and everything, all the boxes were checked. I have sales experience. I have training experience. I have the right personality and attitude. I had the money because this is a franchise organization. So you got to buy in. You got to take your money and buy their product. You buy into their organization. Well, I get a rejection. And I was like, wait, what? I mean, this should have been perfect, right? I mean, well, I'm offended, right? But okay, you get them, you move on. Okay, so he sent me another company. I got with that company, did fantastic with that company, right? First year, I was what they call a part of. I got an award for being in the chairman circle because of my sales and all of this stuff, right? So great, big ups. So I'm saying by the other company, boo-hoo on y'all because y'all missed out on me. I was somebody you should, and they were a startup. They were really just trying to. They only had like 7 franchise owners at the time, so they were trying to build. I'm like, I was one that could have helped your company. Well, a year passes, and my franchise broker calls me back, and he says, "Hey, I'm just checking on you. It's been a year. You've been in this, the second franchise, the one that actually hired me or allowed me to buy in." He said, "I'm just checking to see how that went." And I said, "Oh, it's been great. I got into chairman circle, blah, blah, blah. Great, wonderful group of people." He says, "Well, now I feel like I can tell you the truth about the first one that rejected you." I said, "Oh, tell me about that. What's that?" He said, "Well, they told me that they didn't bring you in to be a franchise owner because, first of all, you're black and you're a woman, and black women can't be good coaches." All right. So when people want to deny our stories and want to say we're making a big deal out of things and we want to play the victim role and we got all kinds of opportunities in front of us, they don't realize these are the systems like you're talking about that are in place. There are people who made a decision at the top based solely on my gender and my color and said I wasn't fit to do this work. And
There you
this is
go.
what we face on a regular basis. We got to always justify who we are and how we are and our value, and it wears us out. So do not deny me my story. Go ahead.
Well, part of another version of that sense of I'm a member of the dominant culture. I don't see what you're complaining about. The blah 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 is that blinder, that narrow focus. Here's an example. I did some and continue to do some training with my church because we're whole beings, we're spiritual beings and biological beings and all that kind of stuff. So I bring my issues of diversity, equity, inclusion into my spiritual life as well. So
Mhm.
I teach and I go to a predominantly white church. So this predominantly white church is trying to pay attention to what it means to be inclusive. Part of that group of white people are white people who believe that they understand and they've been in the struggle along with Black people all the time. And so I've said to them, so tell me how. And it's always a story about, well, somebody Black was a domestic worker in our home and became a member of the family and really cared about him, was treated with respect and, all these loving stories. And I said, oh, okay. So tell me this, when that Black man went home at night, did you make sure that they were safe to
Right.
go and catch the bus?
Mm-hmm.
Be safe to go and get from your house to their house in their Black neighborhood when they had to go through your white neighborhood first? What
Mm-hmm.
did you do about that, ensuring their safety in that regard? No response.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
So the privilege of being able to contain your story where you've done the good thing and the right thing
Right.
is the privilege of not feeling that you're accountable for anything else
Yeah. Yeah.
because you have the power to build your own story and picture your own self-righteousness in the conversation.
Absolutely. How much more did you do for those people to help them to advance in their lives? Have you kept them at a certain spot where they were always just beholden to you? Did you create a space for them to get more? What about their children? Did you help them get into any schools that they could? Because you have that privilege, right? You have that all of that stuff. Or did you just keep them in this little hole because they
It is
have to
like
keep?
exactly that. It's like that other story that they always talk about, whoever this president or senator or whoever went down to NASA and walked up to a black man and said, so what's your job here? What are you doing here? And the black man who's in maintenance said,
Maintenance, uh-huh.
yeah, I'm helping to send a man to the moon or
Seen that.
whatever, and
Hmm.
yay, bravo, bravo for asking the question and love their response. So my interpretation of that whole thing was, so if you talk to that man and he was able to give you that answer, did you leave him in maintenance?
Right. Right. If
Did
he
you
has
not
that
think
kind
he
of
was
vision,
worth given another kind of opportunity? So, get away from me with all those self-congratulatory, pat me on the
yes.
back kind of things.
Yes.
Please.
Yes.
But you're not going to question yourself about that attitude unless you invite me into the room
Right.
and
To
let us
see.
talk.
Yes, we will remove the blinders,
We'll
and
remove the
all of that little
blinders.
narrow view you have of, oh, I did these great things or somebody did, and realize a story is much bigger. Folks want to live as good of a life as you're living and
There
are
you
willing
go.
to do the work. They ain't asking you to just give them anything. They're willing to do the work.
Get
So,
out of my
but what's
way.
getting in the way, huh?
It's get out of my way. Stop
Right.
actively stopping me.
Yes, yes. But then there's a threat. People don't see it as them helping somebody else. They see if I help you, somehow I'm gonna lose because you're gonna take something I think is due me. And I try
Oh,
to tell people, it's not a pie. So if you remove a slice, right, then there's something to take from you. No, it can accommodate everybody. Stop feeling so insecure.
that's it.
So this conversation can go on and on and on and on
It
and on. I
can, and it
love it.
has.
I love it. No, I love it. I love it. I thank you for that. Because I hope you will come back so that we could have a part two or something or part three and do this again because this topic is so huge. We've only, just scratched the surface a little bit just to get the conversation going. But I do want to invite all of you who are listening, if you've made it this far through today's podcast, then I'm sure you're feeling some kind of way. Some things have come up in your mind based on the things you've heard Deb and I talk about. So we welcome your respectful comments. Please, by all means, get involved in the discussion. And if there's more you want to hear about, just drop it in the chat, drop it in the comment section, let us know. And we're interested in knowing what your experiences have been too. So we thank you for listening this week. Come back again next week where we'll have even more great topics that are related to people issues because this is also one more big old people issue and that's what the basis of all of these episodes are on the Sharper Edge podcast. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Deb, for being here this week. Appreciate
Loved
you.
it. Thank you.
All righty, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye.